After a lackluster freshman year, how does Justin Edwards' NBA draft stock look like? This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. Coming into the season, Justin Edwards was heralded as one of the best prospects in his draft class. The Philly-born wing was a former 5-star recruit who was wanted by the G League Ignite amongst others before choosing Kentucky. Edwards was a top 3 player in his high school class, and he was in the top 5 of my preseason mock draft. The sell on him was an athletic wing with NBA positional size and athleticism who could score and handle both in the half court and in transition. But instead, during his freshman season, Edwards' concerns rose to the forefront. His handle was extremely shaky, he struggled to beat defenders, and for most of the season, he was pretty disappointing. The Kentucky wing only played about half of his team's total minutes, and he averaged 9 points and 3 rebounds per game on low usage. In a vacuum, Edwards' freshman year was not terrible. He stayed efficient, he finished the season strong, and he had flashes across levels and on both ends of the floor. However, I think it's safe to say that a lot more was expected. Still, come this summer, I would not be shocked at all if Edwards was still a first-round pick. After all, we have plenty of recent examples of top high school prospects who were underwhelming in college and still went in the top 30. Before the start of the season, I thought that one of Edwards' strengths was his mid-range scoring. At 6'7" with a 6'10" wingspan, Edwards has good size at the wing, and previously he'd shown real skill pulling up. Coming from high school into college, I'm not sure that he did exactly what was advertised. A big part of that, for sure, is definitely that he played relatively few minutes, with all of them coming outside of a focal role. So at least, the saving grace to be pointed out here is that it's undeniable that Edwards was efficient. He made more than 45% of his 2-point jumpers as a freshman, but of course, this is where we should point out that he went 25 for 55, which is an unreliable low sample. Overall though, I like how Edwards can keep it simple. He's not a ball stopper, and he can shoot a little bit on the move with some solid footwork. The Kentucky prospect should also be able to attack off the catch and then pull up, seeing as how the lefty shooter has some solid touch. Going forward, I will want to see more from 3E, because as we're about to dive into, this is an area where Edwards did not show that much growth while in college. In my preseason notes, I had written down that the former 5-star recruit was much better spotting up from deep rather than off the dribble. This really held true because all of Edwards' threes this season were assisted. He closed the year shooting 37% from deep, which is pretty solid, but again, on lower volume than I would like to see. However, I think there was an effort to at least add more threes to Edwards' shot diet, which I can appreciate. For the most part, despite not taking that many threes, he lived up to his end of the bargain, and he continued to prove that he can make these easy, relatively simple spot-up looks. From there, we also saw how he can attack closeouts. There are some translatable pieces here to how he can drive in a straight line, but it is also true that Edwards is looking to go left every single time, and his handle continues to need plenty of work. Now, I understand that this would not be a flashy outcome, but just being a dependable floor spacer at his size and with his background should give Edwards NBA looks for a very long time. However, I also see a couple of pretty evident limitations. The first one, which is not as worrying but I think exists, is that Edwards cannot space the floor that deep. What I mean by that is that his range looks kinda limited. Sometimes he doesn't space all the way out to 3, and then his looks from beyond the arc are almost always very straightforward. Another prospect at the wing, someone like Jacoby Walter, maybe ended his season on more of a slump from 3, but I could see the versatility of his shots and how they were simply not falling. Edwards, on the other hand, is very reliant on easier catch-and-shoot looks. For the most part, maybe he will lift to the wing, and the 3s that he misses are makeable, but he's not running out of screens, rising out of movement, or making the defense pay far beyond the 3-point line. On top of that, there's also the matter of Edwards being unable to create his own shot from 3. Now, this is not a requirement to be an NBA wing, but I did find it somewhat surprising that a top 3 wing in his class scored no unassisted 3s all freshman year. More than anything though, I think this might speak to how Edwards' decision making was very limited all season. He was kept in a narrow role where basically he did not have to worry about creating for himself or his teammates all that much. Getting closer to the rim, I thought that Edwards was a mixed bag. Statistically, he was pretty solid, converting 64% of his close 2s and adding up 20 dunks for the season. Edwards is a good, not great athlete, and even though he is one-dimensional as a ball handler going left, he will still have his moments driving and finishing. Like I just said, Edwards will always want to go in one direction, but I do think there could be something there with his size, handle, and willingness to get physical. If not against a set defense, then this should at least have some uses in transition or against a scrambling defense. But despite the efficiency and the projection, I'm not feeling all that good just yet about Edwards' finishing. He always has one option in mind because he's left-handed to an almost ridiculous extent, so NBA defenses should pick up on this very quickly, which will then be problematic for Edwards. Beyond that, the Kentucky prospect has a load up to his jump, and I thought he looked way more athletic in high school. At Kentucky, in short spaces, he often struggled to finish over length. He never really played above the rim in traffic, and I never really loved his touch either, as he missed some really easy shots. You could definitely say that Edwards lacks shake, everything comes left in a straight line, and otherwise he doesn't have counters. And finally, Edwards does not get to the line enough. He took only 49 free throws all season, which is definitely uninspiring for a 6'7" score-first wing. So, how else can Edwards contribute? Well, it goes back to playing off the ball like we saw with his spot-up shooting. Edwards is a smart cutter who pays attention to when his defender turns his back or starts ball watching. I commented earlier that Edwards can struggle to finish above the rim in traffic, but he's much better when he's moving downhill into space. The Kentucky wing had 20 dunks for his freshman year, being able to cut out of the corner to finish lobs, but Edwards can also play around the dunker spot, taking advantage of good guard play. Looking down the road, I think the hope should be for Edwards to play the 4 in some smaller lineups, and ideally, he would then be able to leverage his positional size to use his hands above the rim and either finish or rebound. Edwards averaged a little more than 1 offensive board per game this season, so I think his goal should be to maintain that figure over the next few years. If Edwards keeps adding value off the ball, then I think he should fit in nicely as a rookie who can contribute on a low volume of touches despite not necessarily being the best shooter. One area where I'm not sure that the former McDonald's All-American ever truly adds value is with his playmaking. Here, the numbers are pretty indicative of the story. Edwards averaged less than 1 assist and less than 1 turnover per game. He had a total of 30 assists in 32 games, which is really low, but to his credit, he also kept his turnovers to a bare minimum, putting up just 27 for his entire freshman campaign. A lot of those turnovers had more to do with his handle rather than with his passing as well, so all of this goes back to something that I mentioned earlier with Edwards' spot-up shooting. At Kentucky, the 5-star wing barely had to make decisions. Edwards pretty much only needed to score, and that was reflected with his facilitating or lack thereof. I didn't see anything leading me to believe that Edwards' passing has not been tapped into, but I do worry that 1, he is not a good enough scorer to be singularly focused on that, especially in the NBA, and 2, once he makes the step up to the next level, he will need to make more decisions on the floor. Justin Edwards will likely be a passable defender, even though his season was mixed at best. In 32 total games, he had 35 steals and blocks combined, which averages out to about 0.2 blocks and 0.9 steals per game. At his best, we see a picture of Edwards as a long, active defender both on and off the ball. Edwards is a decent, solid enough athlete who measures well, and whenever he's engaged, he can definitely make some plays. I'm not sure that he was challenged enough on defense during his sole season at Kentucky, but he definitely will be someone that NBA teams put on wings, so I'm curious to see how much Edwards will truly hold up. Even though it might be a struggle at first, it's worth keeping in mind that in many ways, he's still moldable on this end of the floor. Away from the ball, Edwards can use his wingspan to dig into loose handles or snatch up undisciplined passes. We saw him get some steals in the passing lanes, but make no mistake, he was not a plus defender by any stretch. Throughout the season, there were plenty of moments where I was left disappointed by Edwards' production and engagement level. He got lost off the ball way too much. In turn, that meant late reactions and ineffective defense. Edwards has okay defensive tools, but they're actually yet to play out in reality. For instance, he should honestly be much more fruitful as the low man or whenever he's rotating in from the weak side. Instead, the Kentucky wing was sort of a sleepy defender who generally let the action bypass him on this side of the ball. Another issue that popped up, this time on the ball, is that Edwards fouls too much. Since he only played 21 minutes per game, this was not an issue, but he did pick up more than 5 fouls per 100 possessions. More than anything, I think Edwards struggles to navigate screens, and he's also not that great of an athlete from a strength or speed or bounce-based standpoint. Overall, I'm confident that he should not be a liability. NBA teams should like what he has to offer positionally, and even though he's no longer the most enticing prospect, there are guys like Justin Edwards who stick around in the league after every draft. Justin Edwards did not live up to his preseason hype, but he did end his season on a strong note. I think recent draft history proves that Edwards should still go towards the end of the first round. He has a safe-ish floor playing off the ball, but you are hoping for a higher ceiling with a blend of 3-level shot making, athleticism, and two-way positional tools. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Justin Edwards. And as always, if you enjoyed the channel, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.